and gentlemen, welcome. Welcome. We're actually running on time. Perfect. You just made it on time. All right. My name is Ghenady Meirson. For those of you that are new to this place, and by the way, how many of you are here for the first time? Nice. Welcome. Welcome. I'm the founder of Russian Opera Workshop. I have been doing Russian music in Philadelphia for a very, very long time. So there are blurred lines where I belong. I'm on the faculty at Curtis Institute of Music. I'm also on the faculty of the Academy of Vocal Arts. And one morning I woke up and I said, we need a Russian Opera Workshop in the summer. So this is an independent program where we open it to artists from all around the country, internationally in fact. We have artists from Croatia today. Welcome. That was funny. Okay. So all of the artists are accepted into the program by an audition process. We normally do a YouTube audition. And this past year, we actually had some people come and audition in person here. So it's kind of evolving. This is our 4th year in operation. What we like to do is present 2 operas during the summer. One less performed and one more established piece. This year, as you can see in your programs, in June, we did a Philadelphia premiere of The Maid of Orleans, an opera by Tchaikovsky, which was wonderful to do. And this July session is based on Eugene Onegin. Next summer, you'll see on the other side, we already announced the next summer program. The first opera is The Demon, which is very rarely done, but Rubinstein. Yeah, and Yolanta. You can probably see Yolanta on HD, live in HD from the Met, and hopefully they're not going to strike. But you should all know that we are doing Yolanta, so everybody is welcome to come next summer. So I just want to stop talking because the next person is far more interested than I, and he's a friend of mine. We went to school together with classmates at Curtis. I studied piano. He was a composition major studying with Ned Rora. His schedule is insane. We're lucky he came here on time. Because in New York right now, I think you're a juror for Aaron Copland Fund, right?
Copeland House.
So tell us about this a little bit. You can't? Don't tell us about it. Tell us about Eugene Onegin.
Yes, please.
That will be fun. Ladies and gentlemen, Daron Hagen.
Very kind of you. I've known Ghenady for 33 years. We met in 1981. We were both 5 years old.
Yes.
Ghenady awakened in me a passion for Russian opera. He tricked me into preparing lectures on Russian operas. Primarily, I think, to help me learn how to write operas better myself. I'm going to speak for 20 minutes, and I'm coming from the following place. I was for about 20 years an academic, I guess. I taught. But about 15 years ago, I stopped teaching to concentrate exclusively on composing. If I speak at this level, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Since the early 1990s, I've written 8 operas, and I'm in the middle of 3 more operas. One for San Antonio, one for a company in northern New York, which is being negotiated, so I can't talk about it on YouTube, and another for Skylight Opera Theater in Milwaukee called A Woman in Morocco. Anyway, opera is my life. And talking about opera is one of the great loves of my life. I can actually get excited about it. And I'm very, very excited to talk to you for 20 minutes about Eugene Onegin. The reason is It is the most dramaturgically perfect of all opera libretti. It really is. The more you get into it, the more perfect you realize it is. And the more operas that I embark upon myself with different librettists, I've worked with Mark Campbell, who won the Pulitzer Prize last year for his libretto, 4 with Paul Muldoon, 1 with Barbara Grecki, 1 with Sandy McClatchy, who was president of the American Academy. All fine, fine artists, all with great flair for dramatic structure. And I myself have co-written the treatments for these operas. So I'm not, yes, this is not my first rodeo, but what I have learned is that I am just scratching the surface of that perfection. Just scratching the surface, and I'm not going to show you why. It's all about Pushkin, obviously, the Grand Master, and the structure of Pushkin's great verse novel. I'm going to start out by telling you 2 very brief stories. The first one is about when I was a kid in Milwaukee, the moment I learned that I was going to be a composer. I was 15 years old, and I was watching the Milwaukee Symphony play the New World Symphony of Dvorak, Kenneth Schermerhorn, young, beautiful, leonine on the podium. And a man named Stephen Colburn, I think, playing the oboe solo, the English horn solo. And I was really small. I wasn't 15, I was much younger. Anyway, I didn't know what the word superfluous meant. I just knew it was the greatest word I could think of to describe you. So I wrote him a letter, and I said, Maestro, you are the most superfluous conductor. Years later, we worked together. He ended up in Nashville and was for many years at the Nashville Symphony. And we were having lunch, and I asked if he remembered that letter. And he said, yes, I kept it always, so you're the one. And that's my first story. A superfluous man. I always thought that I was very original. I always thought I was very clever by saying that, making that terrible mistake, but I'm not. The second story may or may not be true. A famous composer-conductor who we know and revere and love, who passed away a few years ago, left his wife for another man. She grew ill, and she passed away of cancer. And on her deathbed, she said to him, I hope you live on and on, alone. I don't know if the story is true. I've heard it from several different people who would know. I tend to trust it because that's the kind of thing a very, very smart person might say to somebody who gets it. But those 2 stories cut to the essence of Eugene Onegin and the very grown-up, very important story about society, our place in it, and the responsibilities we have to one another. It's the story, the tragic story, of a Byronic hero who loves the way that a Byronic hero does, loses love by betraying it, by casting it aside, grows up to learn that he was wrong. And of course, she's moved on to another man. In the meantime, of course, he's shot his best friend, right? So he's lost everything. And he is doomed to live on and on alone. When I was in high school, I had a great lit teacher who said her first day in class, she went up to the chalkboard and she wrote, "Art is life." And she turned around like a cat and said, "What do you make of that?" What a thing to say to a room full of 15-year-olds. Onegin is about art is life, but it is also about art versus life, right? How art and life are balanced on the edge of a knife. So imagine with me that you have an axis. It's on a bias, and it's going this way. And on this side of the bias is art. And on this side of the bias is life. It goes down like this. Just keep that in your head. In 1879, when this opera finally made it to the stage, Thomas Edison had just patented the light bulb. Okay, so that gives you a kind of a place in the arc of things. The first soft-steeled intercontinental steamship had been launched. And AT&T and Bell Telephone formally agreed not to compete. And I guess the telegraph people didn't make out quite as well as the telephone people did, but there you have it. More importantly, another thing that happened, Ibsen's Nora made it to the stage. So this is an important moment in gender relations, and it is a moment where society was undergoing one of those great seismic shifts, right? Where Nora, it's the slamming door heard around the world, right? Nora and Tatiana, two of the great proto-feminist characters, were written in this 1840s and 1850s period. It is also the time when the Byronic, the Russian figure based on the Byronic model of the superfluous man was created. And this is an interesting thing. We have lots of superfluous men now. We sort of take it for granted. But at this time, it was during Nicholas I's reign, the second son syndrome, the one who didn't inherit all the money. The one who inherited all the money was a superfluous man. The second son had to earn a living. He had to go somewhere and reinvent himself. The first son, who inherited the money, had the opportunity to be a man of leisure, right? But a man of leisure, in many ways, is a superfluous man. And the civil service level of men in Russia at this time became decimated by all of these wealthy, well-educated men who should have had a vested stake in the continuance of the Tsarevich, and they should have had a vested interest in not having a revolution happen. All of them instead lived lives of leisure, Byronic lives, of ennui, of existential wanderings, and all the things we love in Byron, and all of the things that are great to read about when you're 15 years old. That's what we have Hemingway and everybody for now in American literature. And if you read them after you're 16 or 17 years old, it's a little hard to stomach those Byronic American heroes. You want them to have second acts, and you know they won't because their authors will die of alcoholism. I'm really not a nice person. Tchaikovsky called Eugene Onegin an opera in lyrical scenes. And the reason that he did this was not so much to forestall criticism. Well, maybe that, because it's always good to call something in order to do that. And critics will say what they will say, whether you call it an eggplant or not. But it's called that for the very wise reason that Pushkin's architecture was so excellent that he could cut out all of the narrative, the connecting narrative, between what opera composers and dramatists call the hot spots. Lenny Bernstein once told me that every musical theater, lyric theater, whether it's musical theater or opera, is comprised of emotional and psychological and dramaturgical nuclear reactors that power the drama. Remember A Boy Like That in West Side Story? That scene, I Have a Love, A Boy Like That, is a nuclear reactor. It's a pivot point on which the relationships between all the women in that show pivot. And it's stolen from this show. It's really wonderful. I mean, in the best possible way it's stolen, because he really got it. So one of the wonderful things, well, the most wonderful thing to me about structuring this particular opera is that every one of the scenes is balanced on that knife blade. It's all a pivotal, emotional, psychological scene. The letter aria, of course, which we all adore and quite rightly venerate, is a manifestation of the core message of the opera. she expresses her feelings through writing. If I say, I love you, that's a direct transaction. If I write it down, I've already translated it into art. When we read it, we have to execute that expression of love we have to execute it. We have to say, I love you. Holy, what? You know? And the reaction becomes part of the expression. Isn't that great? And that's why the letter aria is form following function, as Frank Lloyd Wright stole from Louis Sullivan. You know, that's exquisite. And of course, here's where it gets really great, because the Pushkin novel is so tightly organized that I'm sure you learned in college, and I will read it. It consists of 389 stanzas of iambic tetrameter. 389 of them. Iambic tetrameter. Ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. Right? 389 stanzas. So that means, so if it's a sonnet, that means it's got how many lines? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 lines per stanza. That's a lot of ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. Right? What does that end up manifesting for a poet? Günter Grass had a great short story called Bound Man. You know this story? It's about a fella who works in the midway of a circus, and he's bound from head to toe in ropes. And he stands there and he says, I'm the freest man you'll ever meet. And people argue, they stand there and they argue with him, and he convinces them that he is. It is, as Stravinsky said, now that we can do anything we want as artists, first we have to choose what we're not going to do when we begin each new piece. And in Pushkin's case, he decided he was going to adhere as a poet, as a lyric poet, to this very strict form. The form, I believe, is a perfect manifestation of social constraints. You can't just say, I love you in 1845 in Russia. You have to dress up, you have to do the cravat, you have to ask the father. If you can address the daughter, you have to ask for a dance, there has to be flowers, it takes a lot of planning. It takes 389 stanzas of iambic tetrameter to meet the girl. And so, one of the first things I learned when I was working with librettists was the first really with-it librettist. I said, "Oh, do you want Onegin stanzas?" I said, yeah, sure. And then I went and I learned what they were. And this is a very famous format, and is used pretty commonly still. They're also called the Pushkin sonnet. And again, there's the form-following function, the dramaturgical function. So these people, the characters express themselves not so much in a mannered way, but they labor to express their true feelings through the constraints of the language. They labor to overcome the constraints of language, which is pretty amazing. Not only that, he combined feminine and masculine rhymes. Masculine rhymes are, of course, the easier rhymes. That's when you rhyme the last sound, the last syllable in the line, like lament and repent. There's a good masculine rhyme. Feminine rhymes are a lot harder. You have to rhyme both the last and the penultimate syllable of the last word in the line. So you have a word like project and object. And that's a slant rhyme. That's not such a good rhyme. You could probably think of a better one. In any event, both syllables have to rhyme. So, and I couldn't possibly remember this. Here is the rhyme scheme for all 389 stanzas. Male A, female A, male B. Female A, male B. Female C, male D, female E, Male F, female E, male G, male G. Now, if this is not an ideal poetic correlative, remember that from lit class? For the dance between men and women, or lovers of all kind, I can't think of a better one. It's so fraught, and it's so hard. All the stanzas are like that. Now, step into this. Tchaikovsky, who is introduced to the story, and a friend says, you should do this. He says, no, I couldn't possibly. And of course, the story of the sleepless night, inspiration, whatever that is, comes to him. And he knows he has to do it. I'm finishing my 5th symphony right now. And I needed words for the mezzo soloist in the last movement. And I found a poet who I thought was terrific, and I started setting the words, and I changed some of the words. I adapted them as I said them. And as an opera composer, I don't think twice about this. It's what you do to make it work better. And the poem was pretty good, but it wasn't, 110% a great poem. So I sort of fixed it. And I was talking to my wife last night. She said, you've got a set on you. You didn't even ask the poet. You just went in there and you did that. Have you cleared it with them or with their publisher? I said, oh yeah, I called yesterday. I said, I did. I made a few little changes. And she says, you are out of control. How can you do that? And that is a valid point. When composers set poets to music, we're always doing them damage. Ned Gorham used to tell me that you're an uninvited guest at the party. At least try not to break the furniture. Well, Tchaikovsky wrote stretches of the libretto, so he fixed up the Pushkin a little bit for stretches of this. And the man with whom he co-wrote the treatment, where they sliced out the connective tissue, was Konstantin Shilovsky, about whom I had never heard before, and thank you, now I know about him. And he penned some of the as the children say, some of the lyrics as well. I think it's time now to move on to my last little parlor trick. And that is to show you my little picture. Remember I said that life's life and art on bias? I can tell you about the characters, but you know this opera. I'll tell you just a little bit. So Tanya, let's put her up at the top. What we have here is essentially crossed stars. And remember how Shakespeare talks about star-crossed lovers? I believe, in the best sense, when you've got a really terrific dramaturgical vehicle, you have attained crossed stars. Titania's at the top. If you can't see it, just bear with it. She's 17, right? 17. Her character arc is that she learns not to care. She's empathetic, she's introverted, she's engaged with art, she's sensitive. She expresses her first great love through a letter, right? In time, after she is denied by Onegin, she learns to be a social animal. She herself becomes cynical, worldly wise. Okay. There, next to Tatiana, over here you have Olga, her little sister, right? Age 15. They are sisters, biological sisters. So there's their connection. Olga's a free spirit, right? She's a party girl. She's smart. She's a creature of the world. She's not particularly introspective. We'll give her that. Her character Transit, her story is that her boyfriend her fiancé is murdered by his best friend. How she reacts is very interesting. Pushkin, in the novel, there's really no addressing of this much in the opera, but in the Pushkin it's very interesting. He has a few trenchant things to say about Olga. Across the street here is Lenski, to whom she's engaged. Now, life is over here. Olga's part of life, and Lenski and Titania are over here, and they're engaged in art. Lenski's a poet, right? 18, introvert, romantic. He's a dreamer, and his transit is obviously, all dreamers die badly at the hands of their best friends. So, all your tenors remember that. So, there you have, Lenski is engaged to Olga, and Lenski's metaphorical brother is Onegin. So you've got biological sisters, metaphorical brothers, and the transaction here of being engaged. Okay, there's the first crosses and stars. Isn't that interesting? And Tatiana, innocent, Onegin, decadent. And they flip-flop in the course of the opera. And in that flip-flopping, nature is betrayed. Isn't that great? And when nature is betrayed, everybody's going down. That's really, that's how it is. So here you have the women over here, and you have the men over here. And then there's that horrible critic, Zaretsky. He's just Judas. You know? He knows enough to have contempt for Onegin. He is a nobleman whose character transit is that he denies several times, just like another fellow who denied, his own moral and class codes, behavioral codes. He denied himself. That was his betrayal. So he's going down too. Okay? I didn't even put him on the map. He's just over here under male. Okay, so now that you've got all of this, if you join them all together, Lenski, poet, Tatiana, poetic introvert, connected by art, Olga and Onegin, connected by life, they're the partiers, right? Tatiana and Onegin, like north and south poles. And you put all the women over here, and all the men over here, and all the artists here and all the life here. You have a star, you have an X. What is all of this in here? That's the social construct. That's the cauldron in which all of this happens. So when you look at a play like West Side Story, or any great Shakespeare play that's been adapted to theater by contemporary dramatists, you can always boil it down to the social construct, and you can place everybody around the table of demise. Isn't that cool? With a good libretto. But this is the best. I mean, boy, if I could do this, you know, I can write Mickey Mouse music, and it's a show would work pretty well. But what happens with this particular opera is that Tchaikovsky is able to be the characters. In all of his other operas, he's always Tchaikovsky writing an opera about these people. But in this opera, I really, in all my heart, I hear him as Titania. And I hear him inhabiting Onegin. I hear him in these characters in a way that I perhaps I'm still too naive about the other operas to yet understand. But as a person who sits in the theater a lot, searching and trying to be sensitive to verisimilitude coming off the stage, emotionally and psychologically. In this particular opera, when she, at the end, when he comes back to her, the regret, it's like Marshall, only better. Because, you know, it's another, oh, you can take it, we'll do Rosalía. And we'll talk about the viola parts. It's at the end, the wisdom and the fact that the music never, ever announces itself in this opera. That means that his star-crossed lovers were so driven by who they were and their desire to escape the constraints of the social compact in which they found themselves enmeshed, that they had to sing. And that is what makes it such a great, great